All right, guys. Bang, bang. I've got Jack here with me. Thanks so much for doing this, man.
Yeah, of course. Fun to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're a fascinating guy because you are an investor, but you don't invest in outside companies. You invest in companies that you and your partners and your team create internally. So pure incubation.
Yeah.
One of those businesses I want to start off with, just to explain the model, is HIMS, which is a multi-billion-dollar company that you guys took public recently.
Yeah.
Walk us through, how do you go from an idea to, hey, we have a multi-billion-dollar business sitting in like an investor seat?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. You know, at this point, I started Atomic with my own capital in 2012. We've been scaling it up. And one of the biggest lessons I'd say that we've learned is that distribution is actually more important than ideas. So ideas are only worth, anything if they reach a ton of people, customers, businesses, whoever you're kind of targeting. So we have kind of mastered at Atomic testing distribution even before we create companies. So HIMS was an exercise of the healthcare system can use a lot of work. I mean, it's pretty broken in a lot of areas. It's unfortunate. 33 cents of every dollar in the economy goes through it, and people are actually, life expectancy is going down. So we were trying to think about, what are ways that we can improve that. Telemedicine is an obvious one that's really interesting. And we tested a number of ideas, and believe it or not, hair loss just tested off the charts. I mean, it was absolutely incredible how much demand there was for hair loss. And when you study that market, it was really interesting. There's like 50 million men in the United States that suffer from hair loss. And there's a drug or a couple of drugs that work extremely well to treat it that are actually not that expensive. And only 50,000 people at the time were taking it.
This is like Propecia, whatever these other ones are. Yeah.
Exactly. So you're sort of like, why aren't people taking these things? Like, are they not aware of them? What's going on? And it turns out, and one of the things that we found in telemedicine in general is that stigmatized conditions, things that people are embarrassed about, that they don't necessarily want to go to their doctor about and talk about, those tend to be very undertreated. And hair loss was kind of like a really, really good beachhead for men's health overall, where you have so many people that are suffering from it. You have such a good treatment that works really well with like very minimal side effects. And the interest in it was just like astounding. I mean, we knew we had kind of struck gold just based on those distribution tests we did early on. And from there, we just set out to build it. We built it extremely quickly. We launched it. And within about 3 years of launch, a little over 3 years, we took it public for about a $3 billion market cap, which is pretty incredible. And the company continues to grow and scale and, is taking on new things. We've launched hers. We're doing women's health now too. But that's an example of, if you get the distribution part of it right, you can build a really, really big company really quickly.
So it's funny that you're talking about this because over the weekend, I was with a couple of friends and hair loss came up.
Yeah.
And for a while, I've always said that Propecia, and I forget the other pill, is widespread among men between like 25, 35 years old, but none of them talk about it with each other. It's not like, I think kind of, it's known that women are very collaborative in terms of recommending products and like all this stuff to each other, but men not so much.
Yeah.
And then as men kind of phase out and they start to try to have kids and all this stuff, then they start looking, oh, should I still take it? Should I not? And whatever. But when you talk about testing the distribution, right? So 50 million men, okay, you probably Google and figure out, how many people suffer from hair loss. How do you actually start to test how many people are already taking this? What's the actual interest, right? Because one thing anecdotally, oh, my friends talk about it, but how do you actually scientifically understand, is this worth pursuing as an idea or not?
Yeah, it's a great question. At the time, there had been sort of this telemedicine 1.0. So you might have heard of companies like Teladoc. It's an incredible company. It's doing well. It's a public company. I'd invested in a company called Doctor on Demand as an angel investor. And what those companies created is this idea of the virtual doctor visit. So kind of like primary care. You're sick, you need something. Instead of going to an office, you go to an app and they treat you for things. And our thesis was, well, the thing you really learn about consumers on the internet is they're activated by like very specific pain points.
Okay.
So in that case, you're competing with the waiting room, you're competing with the process of getting an appointment, all of that stuff, as opposed to acute things people are suffering from. So if you advertise those things that people are suffering from, they're much more likely to connect with them. And then what if you use telemedicine as a vehicle to diagnose them, confirm whether or not they have that, and confirm whether or not the treatment's going to work for them, and then you deliver care through the internet. I mean, it's just a much, much more scalable model. It makes a lot of sense. So we ran a lot of ads early on to test these various conditions that could catch fire like that. And, hair loss just tested off the charts as being something really interesting, something people were aware of. They wanted to do something about it, but for whatever reason, they weren't going to the doctor. And that's kind of this almost telemedicine 2.0 model of focus on the condition, use telemedicine to diagnose it, and then treat people digitally.
What you're really talking about here is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing when starting a business, is picking the right market.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're essentially in a very kind of methodical way saying, okay, we think telemedicine's interesting,
Yeah.
but we're not going to put capital and time and resources behind this until we really understand exactly what we're going to go do. And so do you basically just sit around in a room and you're like, all right, let's brainstorm what's the 50 things that potentially telemedicine could solve, and then like let's create ad creative and go and actually test it all, and then we'll kind of put it through a funnel and okay, this is the thing. Is that kind of how it worked?
It depends on the case. Most of the things that we start are actually problems that we observe. So believe it or not, at Atomic, despite the fact we've started dozens of companies, I don't know if we've ever had a brainstorming session.
Okay, interesting.
I actually think brainstorming sessions can lead to contrived ideas that aren't as good as there's a problem in the world. A lot of people are suffering from something. How do you solve it? And thinking creatively about how to solve it and focus on the solution and test the solution. Make sure it is as big of a problem that you thought it was and that is the right solution for the problem. So, we have like 600 ideas for companies at this point. A lot of those are observed problems in the world. They could be problems people have. They could be problems companies have. They could be problems in specific industries like healthcare, real estate, finance, education, et cetera, et cetera. We work across all of those markets, but it's usually observing a problem is a much, much better way to start a company than kind of contrived brainstorming.
You said you have 600 ideas today. Is there like a master doc and you literally just keep putting them in there and then you guys prioritize and decide which one to work on next, or like how does that work?
Yeah, there's a master doc. It exists. It's in an Evernote file, and we kind of work off of that. And, increasingly as Atomic increases and we have more and more employees across our companies and across our firm, people also contribute ideas, which is great. Venture capitalists sometimes come to us with ideas. They'll say, hey, we've studied this market. We think that there's something here. We've looked at 10 companies. We don't think any of them are doing it right. Hey, Jack and team, like if you could build this company, we would love to fund it and partner on the Series A. So that's another way that we do it. And then B2B companies, interestingly, a lot of our most successful B2B companies have come from solving problems of our existing portfolio. And that's great because it's a problem, you can observe it, and you have a built-in customer base to kind of dog food it, perfect the product before you get it out there in the world. And that's been a really effective way for us to build B2B companies. So Atomic is kind of like its own self-perpetuating ecosystem in a way where as we start more companies, they have more problems. We can solve those problems using technology. As we enter more markets like healthcare, we discover all of these adjacencies and new white spaces that lead to more ideas. Software is eating the world. It's like the biggest thing that's happening in the world. People don't talk about it enough. And the problem is, as people from the technology industry, we don't always understand those industries. We don't know how they operate. We don't know why. We might observe that they're messed up, but we don't know why. Once you're in that industry, you understand it so much better. You understand the players. Why is it backward? Why was the system created this way? And in doing that and understanding that, it actually yields a lot of ideas on how to fix it and make it better.
How does Atomic work? So maybe we could start with like why you started it and then the evolution of it, because it's a fascinating model, right? You're essentially acting as a venture capitalist, but you're getting to say yes or no to the ideas that are started versus other people come in and just pitch you, hey, I started a company, now I'm raising a Series A, and you kind of are almost seeing a snapshot in time versus actually being there from day one of the creation of the business.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I got my start pretty early. I starting companies at age 15. My dad came to the U.S. to get his PhD at MIT without a dollar to his name, slept on a concrete basement floor in a sleeping bag because he couldn't afford housing. So
where was he from?
He moved across the world. He was actually born in southern Lebanon in a farming family.
Okay.
And worked his way to the best science and engineering school in France and then to the U.S. He came here not even speaking English that well. And I saw him kind of go through this journey. We kind of grew up somewhat poor, and then he had some success and started a company and sold it. And when I was 12 or 13, he wanted to start a company that measured everything everyone did on the internet and invited me to join it as the third employee as a software engineer. And that's really where I fell in love with technology, fell in love with data, saw that grow.
Your dad hired you to work at his company.
Yeah. And I was smart back then. I took stock instead of cash, so that was good.
Oh, very
probably
smart.
because like child labor laws, I probably couldn't have gotten paid cash anyway. But it ended up working out, and I just got hooked. So I starting companies at age 15. Went to Wharton undergrad. I had a professor that offered me $500,000 to drop out and start a company, which I took him up on. Moved out to the West Coast and sold my first company to eBay when I was 24 years old. And
when you're at Wharton, why does the professor come to you specifically? What did you already have the idea? Just walk through that. That's a very unique kind of situation in life, and then one that you ended up capitalizing on.
Yeah, my experience at Wharton was interesting. So I went to public school, and then when I got there, I looked around the room and I was like, these people are really smart.
Is that more a judgment on the people at Wharton or on the public school system?
Well, I guess a little bit of both. But, my freshman year, I was like, okay, I have to beat these people. I have to prove that I can beat these people. So I just put my head down. I got near perfect GPA because I hustled. I just wanted to make sure I could beat them and be the best. And then after that, I was kind of like, this is kind of cool, but I don't know how much of this I'm going to use throughout my life. I'm going to actually just stop kind of going to class and start working on ideas. And I kept inventing ways to not have to go to class. So one way to not go to class is you do an independent study with a professor. Yeah. There's a professor who happened to like entrepreneurship. So I created this independent study to not have to go to class, to look into ideas with this professor. And I had about 10 different ideas, and we went through them throughout the course of the semester. And at the end, he said, Jack, I think this is a great idea. If you want to do it, I'll give you $500,000 to get you started. And I took him up on it. I dropped out and moved out to the West Coast.
What was the idea?
So the idea was, at the time, and this actually continues to be the case, the internet's influence on offline purchasing is massive. So this sort of research online, buy offline phenomenon. The internet has a massive amount of information about products, how good they are, ratings, reviews, prices, etc. But most of the purchasing still occurs in the physical economy. And there wasn't a bridge between those two systems. Okay. So we created a company called Milo that searched those stores just like Kayak searches flights. And we would search their inventory systems in real time. And we tell you, here are all the products that are available near you. Here's the ratings. Here's the reviews. Here's who has the best price. And then help you go and actually buy it at a physical store instead of buy it online. And a lot of people want instant gratification. They want to see it. They want to look at it. They want to ask questions about it before they buy it. So it was a huge trend. It still is a massive trend. It actually accounts for almost half of commerce, this behavior that exists. And yeah, it was a really big idea. And I felt like it was worth dropping out to go and do it.
Yeah. You end up selling it to eBay. How long do you stay at eBay before you can't not go start more companies?
Yeah. So I had a 3-year deal with them where I was supposed to stay. And I'm just a big believer in not wasting time. I'd heard so many stories about founders languishing after your company gets acquired and they're miserable. And I'm just not going to do that. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to go try to bust my ass and do some really cool things while I'm here and try to learn. This was the first time I could learn on someone else's dime was how I thought about it. So I started starting tons of these different product groups under me to build products for eBay. And a lot of those products hit and they were working and they did amazing things for the company. And there was a lot of press and some of them drove the stock price. The biggest thing I built, 130 million monthly active users used.
What was that?
It was the feed. So the idea was, I was an early investor in Pinterest very early on. And this idea of discovery commerce, eBay's kind of almost all the revenue comes from the search box, but there's so much amazing stuff on eBay. So what if you could create a follower model where you could follow safe searches and brands and different people, buyers and sellers, and get a feed on the homepage? And we built that really quickly, and it was an awesome experience while I was there. And I worked really closely with the CEO, John Donahoe, while I was there. He now runs Nike. He's an amazing person. He was a mentor to me. And he was so kind to me that he was after 2 years of eBay, I was like, I don't think I can do the 3rd year. He gave me the 3rd year. So the world works out sometimes. If you work really hard, people are nice, and he's a wonderful human being.
Amazing. So 2 years, and then did you know that you wanted to go start what became Atomic and kind of do incubation, or how do you go from leaving eBay to what is now known as Atomic?
Yeah. So I had,
The grin on your face means there's a good story here.
Well, eBay was in the South Bay and I was living in San Francisco. So I had a commute. And during the commute, I have just like an active mind. I'm just like always thinking about things, listening to things. And I was, maybe every 3 days, I'd come up with an idea for the company on this commute for a new company. And I wrote it down and I took all the other ideas that I had, and by the time I was ready to leave eBay, I had 250 ideas for my next company. And I put 2 and 2 together, which was to say, hey, if I can build these companies for eBay, these products, and there's no upside for anyone that works on them, there's a lot of organizational inertia working against you in building that. Why can't you do that with startups from first principles? You can, assemble super teams. You can give everyone upside. You can work on huge problems. You don't have to just work in the sandbox of eBay. It should work from first principles. And then, of course, the corollary thought to that is, okay, 250 ideas, you're not going to be able to start them all. How do you find the 10 that matter? And that's kind of been the journey that I've been on. It's just like, how do you test ideas? How do you figure out if they're worth working on? We have such limited time in our lives. How do you just like work on the very, very best stuff, given that we have opportunity cost? And over time, that's kind of what we've perfected in our process. We hold our time very sacred. We think there's like a huge power law on how time is spent. And we take only the very best things and we put a lot behind them. We put a lot of capital and a lot of time.
When you have 250 or 600 ideas on a list, you can go test. So you can say, hey, telemedicine's interesting. Let's go run ads and figure out what in telemedicine. How do you pare down 250 or 600 to 10? Right? That seems to be almost the most important thing that you do, because if you're going to spend your time on something, knowing the 10 versus the 240 or the 590 is pretty important.
Yeah, it's really important. Absolutely. Yeah, the danger of having 250 ideas is, man, you can stretch yourself thin pretty quickly. So we actually did something that I'm very proud that we did. We sort of passed the marshmallow test, so to speak, with Atomic, where I said the first year we're only going to do 1 company. The next year we're going to do 2. The next year we're going to do 3. Then we're going to do 4. And then once we have the infrastructure set up where we can be convinced that each subsequent thing we're doing is of higher quality than the last thing, then we'll scale it. But we're not going to do it prematurely. And there are kind of 2 processes that we've found to identify what those opportunities are. One is we just find someone we love and we just like want to work with them. And it doesn't matter what idea we work on together. And we'll open up this list of, hundreds of ideas. We'll pick 10 to 15 that we mutually think are interesting. And then we activate this playbook that we've developed over time of how to test these ideas, because those people also don't want to waste their time. They only want to work on big ideas. And through that process, if we find one, and only if we find one that we think is super, super compelling, then we take all of the data, all of the research, and we say, okay, we're going to start it. We fund it with $250,000 typically. And then we test any remaining questions behind the idea before putting millions of dollars into it, and then tens of millions and more beyond that. So that's one way we do it. Second way we do it is my partners and I, we've all started billion-dollar companies before. And, we're good at building products ourselves. So if we're really passionate about something, we'll really drive it internally. We have about 40 people at Atomic that are expert company builders. And if we find something that's really great, we'll start it, we'll build the product, we'll try to get it to some semblance of scale. It could be millions of dollars of revenue. It could be, in some cases, been as high as like 25 million in bookings. And then our job is to replace ourselves. Like, our model does not work if we run the companies. So we will get them working, and then we'll try to find the perfect person in the world to run it. And we will make them CEO, and we'll make them a co-founder, and we'll give them a co-founding stake, even though it's already working, because we want them to feel like they are a true co-founder and they have ownership over the idea, the product, the culture. They get to hire out their own team, and we kind of start taking a little bit of a step back, which is what I think really talented people want. I think they want autonomy. I don't think they want people breathing down their necks. And, that method has been very, very effective and something that we've continued to develop and lean into.
From a data perspective, how many companies? You said there's about 40 people. How much money do you think you've invested? What do you think like the total portfolio? Just whatever data you're comfortable sharing in terms of just like progress or like how well it's gone.
Yeah, it's gone really well. We've started a couple dozen companies at this point. Last year was a prolific year for us. We started almost a company a month. So now we really feel like we have this platform. We have this playbook. We're confident that we're not diluting ourselves. We have the leverage to be able to build these companies without The risk of getting stuck with something that we're going to have to work on for a long time. When we raise capital, we don't want to lose people's money. We do not want to lose people's money. We hold that really, really sacred. So it's fine if we lose money as a fund, because we can take the people and we can put them on a better idea, and we're aligned with our investors in that. But if we're signed up and we raise outside capital from people, we're going to try to make it work come hell or high water. So it's a really, really high bar that we have internally for deciding ultimately what we want to work on.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about maybe something like OpenStore, right, which is a new company that you and Keith Rabois have worked together on to launch, how does that come together? And then maybe walk us through, I don't know, maybe you're 90 days, 120 days into this thing, right? Just like getting to the point of, okay, we're doing this, we have a team, and we're moving towards a launch.
Yeah. It's a good question.
And that one may be an outlier, but still.
Yeah, no, it wasn't too much of an outlier. I mean, there are a couple of things that are different about it, but the observation of the problem, which is how we come up with a lot of our ideas, came from, I was mentoring a female entrepreneur that had started a company, and she came to me, and the first question she asked me was really interesting. She asked me, how do I sell my company? And I said, that's interesting. Most people don't ask me that. Typically, that's not typically the first question. Okay, let's go into the business more. And she said, we develop organic skincare products, 85% gross margin. I said, great. How many people come back and purchase your product? 88% of them come back. Wow, fantastic. They come back to your site. They put in their credit card number over and over again. She was like, yeah, they do. I was like, okay.
It works.
It works. That's awesome. Good for you. And how do you get your customers? Do you do marketing? She's, I kind of do marketing sometimes, but I don't really like doing it because I like just the cash flow of the company. I said, okay, interesting. And what's the top line revenue and how much would you be willing to sell for? And she said 3 to 4 million top line, and she'd probably be willing to sell for 1x or a little bit more. So I thought, wow, that's really interesting. This seems like a good business. If you owned a company like this, there's so many ways you could make it a lot better and take these amazing products she developed and distribute them across the world in a more efficient way. So then I thought, well, what if you created a website to answer that question? How do I sell my business? What's it worth? Should I sell it? And, Keith had founded OpenStore, which is an incredible company that's public, where you can go to a website, you can put in your address, they give you an offer to buy your house. What if you did the same thing for having someone buy your company? That would be pretty cool. So that's kind of the journey we set out to embark on. We're doing a little bit of work on it at Atomic, and I love Keith. Keith is amazing. I mean, he's one of the most talented people in the world, I think. He invested in Milo, my first company, so I've known him for a really long time. There's actually a funny story of how we got to know each other originally. But I, love Keith and thought he would be the perfect person to work on with this and talk with him about it. And, we kind of evolved the idea from there and added a lot to it. And Keith has such a breadth of expertise in this area. I said, why don't we co-found this together? And we decided to co-found it earlier this year. It started, neither of us really had office space. So everyone was working out of my house until midnight every day. And my girlfriend eventually got a little tired of that, just having, engineers and people throughout the house. So now, it's funded. We have an office. We're scaling it. It's really exciting. It's an amazing phase of growth for the company. And I really think that it can be a massive, massive company. And it's a lot of fun to work together with Keith on it.
It's unique because he's the CEO. He's also a venture capitalist. He's funded a ton of great businesses. He's co-founded a bunch of great businesses. You have as well. How do you think about building a team early, especially when it frankly sounds like there's multiple people around the table that could lead the business as the CEO or as an executive? And then on top of that, you also have this 40 odd number of people who are kind of experts at company building.
Right.
And so it's almost like in some weird way, there's tons of expertise, there's tons of capabilities, tons of experience on the table, but somebody's got to be the CEO. Somebody's got to do the work, et cetera. How do you kind of think through evaluating that in that situation?
Yeah, it was an interesting conversation. We were like, should we be co-CEO? Should someone else be CEO? How do we kind of go about this? And, we settled on Keith being the CEO, which is awesome. And I'm super, super supportive of that. And I think one of the amazing things about Keith is he has such an incredible eye for talent. He can basically sit down within 5 minutes of talking to someone, know if they're going to be really good. It's like an extraordinary superpower that he has. And it's been really fun to collaborate and identify like who are the absolute best people in the world to start this company with. We just set a really high bar and we went after them. And we've assembled this team that like you couldn't even imagine, like even before we had money in the company, like an unbelievable team to go after this. And, you know, from me start building so many companies and investing personally in him, you know, investing in so many companies and operating and whatnot, you really learn like, okay, who do you need in the team? Who's missing? How are we going to find them? And, you know, so many of the conversations early on have been, how do we assemble this super team? Who's missing? How do we get them? And we've prioritized that, and we've been very successful in building an awesome team so far.
I had dinner with him and a couple of other folks shortly after people started to hear that this was happening. And he said on multiple occasions, we just hired and, you know, the best GC I've worked with or the best this or whatever. And it just struck me. I know that he's always said, you know, the people you hire is kind of the company you build, but seeing it in practice, almost in real time, was fascinating because it literally felt like you, him, and whoever else sat down and kind of looked at the Rolodex and said, okay, we need a GC, right? Who's the best that we know? And like, okay, let's just go get them. Yeah. And I think that there's a difference because I know that him, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. Keith specifically thinks about, you don't have to iterate your way to success. Like you can just say, hey, the world needs this, and like you can go build it. Yeah. And so same thing with talent, right? Yeah. Of just like, that's the best person. We're going to go do whatever it takes to go hire them to come join us. Yeah. And so from a product development standpoint, are you kind of the similar mindset, or do you do more kind of iteration and because you come from like a testing, you know, mentality or model to find the idea. Once you have the idea, how much of it's iterative versus kind of more like we're going to bend the world to us?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, different ideas scale for different reasons. The constraints on OpenStore, the two constraints are technology and capital. That's really it. And the world's your oyster. There's 13 to 15 million merchants in the world that we can work with.
And capital being the capital needed to purchase the businesses.
To purchase the businesses, correct, which is a lot.
Yep. And then the technology, explain what the limitations there are.
The technology to underwrite the companies, to put them on a common platform, to improve them over time. I mean, we're great at building technology. That's like in both of our sweet spots. So we understand that very, very well. So those two things actually don't seem tremendously risky. And it's pretty obvious if you get those right, you're going to have a really, really, really big company. So it made sense to go and raise a lot of capital and get the right team together and just really go big after it. Particularly because you need a certain amount of capital to prove out this model. 50 million, 100 million, I mean, more potentially. Some of our other companies, you can actually start them, and really what determines whether or not they're going to scale and become big companies is this distribution question. Yep. And distribution is now, we live in an internet era of gatekeepers. There's Facebook, there's Google, and you have to acquire customers either through marketing or sales. So we iterate so much on the unit economics, and you can actually, we figured out ways to do that very, very inexpensively with limited amounts of capital. And once we've nailed that, and only once we've nailed that, then do we decide to scale the company up. And actually in that process, if that's kind of what you're trying to optimize for, sometimes having too much resources, too many cooks in the kitchen, it can actually be distracting in like finding the way to get this thing to scale. Once it scales, once it goes from 0 to 1, where you found product market fit and you're going to the 1 to N, you know, scale strategy, then you raise a lot of capital and you go and you blitz the market. And so it just depends on the idea and, you know, what does it take to get started? This is a company with a high ticket of entry to start.
Hey guys, what's going on? Before we continue with this awesome episode, I want to quickly talk about our sponsor, Kraken. For the last 10 years, Kraken has built one of the best platforms to buy and sell cryptocurrencies online. They've got a brand new mobile app, the Kraken app. Today, you can go on and buy Bitcoin or up to 60 of the most popular cryptocurrencies in the world. And you can do that on the go 24/7. All you have to do is simply download the app, connect your bank account, and you can get started investing with as little as $10. It only takes a minute to get started. With the new Kraken app, you'll have your portfolio in your pocket. You can track your portfolio, see who the winners and losers are every day, track your favorite project, or just simply look at the trading volume for your favorite assets. It has all the features you need without any of the complexity. it's simply the best place to buy and sell cryptocurrencies. So go to kraken.com/bangbang to learn more, or go to your favorite app store and simply search the word Kraken, and you can download the mobile app there. Kraken's been a longtime supporter of this show, so to say thanks, it would mean the world to me if you would go and download their new mobile app. All right, let's get back into this episode. I hope you're enjoying this one. When you think of distribution over ideas, that's a very unique way of thinking about it. There's a kind of an old saying, I don't know, Paul Graham or whoever, it's like first-time entrepreneurs focus on the product, second-time entrepreneurs focus on kind of distribution, right? When you talk about distribution, is it just total addressable market? Is it your ability to communicate with that market? Is it a cost thing, right? Like unpack a little bit distribution and kind of what that means and how you think about, oh, this has great distribution and therefore we should go pursue it versus maybe something that people may think has great distribution but would be a red flag to you.
Yeah, there's really two things. I mean, one is the scalability, the channels that exist to reach customers. And because we've operated so many companies, we understand all of the channels to reach customers. And we know what works in them. We know what doesn't work in them. So we know how to test them even before you scale them up. So you test the channel, see if it works, and then you test the scalability of the channel, which is really important. You don't want to build something that looks good early on. Sometimes Facebook's algorithm will trick you and make you think you have a great company, and then you get it to, some millions of revenue and it kind of peters out. Scalability is really, really, really important. And it's related to broadly how big of a problem you're solving. If you're solving a really big problem and it's going to resonate with a lot of people, you're going to reach a ton of people and you're going to improve a lot of people's lives, and it's going to be a great company.
Mm-hmm. And when you think through, let's say, the scalability, almost the sustainability of unit economics or the scalability of something, how much of that is you can actually just put money and kind of experience to work and quickly figure it out versus literally it just takes time, right? And so it's a 6-month or a 12-month exercise to actually understand the scalability or the sustainability.
Yeah. It is very difficult. So the common problem with startups, right, is like you have an idea, you go and you raise money from friends and family or whatever, and then you're like a year in, you have to raise a little bit more money, and 2 years in, you kind of have this product and you try to get it out there. And 9 times out of 10 startups fail because they hit that distribution wall. Mm-hmm. So we just pull that wall up to day 0 and we say, if we can't get through that wall, we're not even going to start the company. We almost don't care if this is a good idea in the abstract. We want to work on ideas that matter. And that's really, kind of the focus and the secret of how we've been able to scale so many companies so quickly. And each successive company is scaling faster than the last. It's reaching $1 million ARR, some kind of milestone that we say is product market fit earlier than ever. And, our ambition is to scale things really quickly and make progress really quickly.
How do you think through business models, right? So one of the things that's fascinating to me is in many of the companies that you guys have started, in hindsight, great alignment between multiple kind of parties in a transaction or in a business. Yeah. It feels like some businesses get off the ground quickly. They've got what appears to be scalability. They've got distribution, but there's some misalignment. There's some place where the business actually is, greedy in hindsight. But it seems like you guys have really nailed down how to avoid that. And so just how do you think about, okay, hair loss, great. That's a huge problem. Telemedicine, we think, is the solution. How do we make money, right? How do we actually build a business model that is scalable, sustainable, but aligns everyone here so that we don't get 3 years down the road and realize that somebody else came up and kind of stole all the customers. We did all that market education, et cetera.
Yeah, there are a few metrics that are really important to optimize early on in a company's history. The most important one is the payback period on spend. So if you put money into acquiring customers, how quickly do you get paid back? The lower that number, the better, because you can scale faster and you can recycle capital and you can scale the company really quickly. And ultimately what you're looking for is, an LTV to CAC metric of, what's the lifetime value of customer relative to how much it costs you to get them. And if you start off with, the CAC down here and the LTV way up here, you have a lot of room for error. So we try to look for companies like that. If we're doing testing and they're a little bit closer to here or they're like here, we're just not going to start the company. We have 600 ideas. We have such high opportunity cost for our time. We just don't want to be working on it.
Is there a magic number? Like, is it a 4 times LTV to CAC and you're like, okay, if we're there or better, then like, that's a green light? Or is it more kind of case by case and you got to kind of feel out based on the type of business, the ticket size, et cetera?
It's a little case by case. I think best in class is like you're getting paid back in 3 months or less. which we figured out how to do for a lot of our companies. And the LTV to CAC is above 5 to start, because unit economics can decay a little bit as you scale. So you want to give yourself some room. Of course, you're going to continue to improve the product. It's going to get better. People are going to get more value out of it. So, there will be an offsetting force to that. But starting with those bars pretty far away from each other is really smart, because you give yourself a lot of wiggle room.
Yeah, makes sense. Another theme other than distribution over ideas is democratization of access. You can see this in a ton of stuff that you guys have done.
Yeah.
Just any thoughts or insights there in terms of why that's such a big theme that you're focused on?
Yeah, it's something that we're really passionate about. I think that one of the great patterns for ideas is taking things that the rich have access to, whether that's like people or it's companies, and how do you make it cheaper and distribute it to more people and give people access to that thing. So Uber is a great example of that, right? I mean, their rich people would pay for drivers, and they'd sit around all day and like sit outside their house, and you'd have a driver that could take you point to point whenever you wanted. And they said, okay, how do we take this and how do we democratize it? How do we give more people access to this? And they brought it down, and they brought the cost down over time while increasing the quality of the experience. And now everyone uses it in the world, and everyone basically has a private driver where you can press a button on your phone and a car shows up, which is magical. So we think about the world a lot in that way. We try to start a lot of companies that take things that people already want, but that are very expensive, and how do we make them cheap, and how do we make them accessible, and how do we give that kind of an experience or product to a lot of people. And it's almost always a recipe for a good company, because if people aspirationally want it already and it exists, but it's just too expensive, if you can figure out a way to make it cheaper and better at the same time, it's gonna get distribution. A lot of people are gonna be interested in that.
Yeah, a lot of what we're talking about here is what I would consider more of the like analytical approach to company building, right? It's being intelligent about how you spend your time. It's being very kind of ruthless in prioritization, but there's work that needs to be done, right? Like, so great, we can sit around, we can look at the 600 ideas. Here's the one that we like. We went and we tested it. Looks great. What do the 40 people at Atomic do? Right? Are these all software engineers, and it's, somebody comes off the mountain and says, hey, we're going to go build this company, and they all get to work? Is it kind of a more well-rounded team of like various disciplines? Just it's a pretty big team to kind of do this over and over and over again. So what exactly do they do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a lot of the most talented people in the world that I know, they can't actually just work on one idea. It's like a little too boring, like their processing bandwidth is so high that they can handle so many things, and they're actually best when they're doing a lot of things. I almost think about like human beings in an interesting way, where if you ever open up Activity Monitor on the Mac or do Control-Alt-Delete or whatever on like a Windows machine, the processor is always humming at 10%. It's capable of so much, but it's always at 10% because you're always doing word processing, or you're surfing the internet or something like that. At Atomic, we figured out how to rev the human processor from like 10% to like 30% or maybe 40%, because people are capable of so much if you give them the opportunity to work on high value things. And it turns out a lot of the most talented people in the world want that. They don't want to be bored. They want to be engaged. They want to work on really big things that matter. So we've tried to find the very best people in design, engineering, but also things like things entrepreneurs don't tend to like to deal with, which is really a great way to take things off their plate. Legal, accounting, finance, HR, recruiting, ops, BD. We do a lot, as you'd imagine, around distributions. We have great people at marketing. We have great people at sales. And those people are kind of functional experts at what they do that normally would not work on an early stage company. There's not enough for them to do. The company probably couldn't pay for them because they're pretty expensive, because they're really good at what they do. So if you take them and you spread them across companies, you can bring a SWAT team of like amazing people to day zero when you're company building that know what they're doing. This is what they do. They do it in their sleep, and you can build incredibly quickly.
When they come and they do this, how much of it is, okay, in the beginning, I'm actually doing the work. Let's say I'm an expert at sales, right?
Yeah.
I'm doing the work. 6 months later, I'm helping to hire somebody to come in. And by month 12, now I'm a coach, right?
Right.
Is that kind of a natural progression for somebody who's like has a specific expertise on the Atomic team?
Yeah, it is a natural progression. We view our job as like we have to do so much work up front, because if we get it right, the company is actually going to need us less. And that's how our model scales. Like we can't be like micromanaging people. It's just not going to work. So we do so much work up front to make the company architected well, get the right DNA into the company. And if we're successful in doing that, the truth is the companies start taking off and they need us less and less. So it's a gradual progression. But a lot of companies do choose to continue using like this shared team of services that we provide, because it lets them stay focused on the things that actually really matter about companies, which is the product, the customer. How do you solve the problem? How do you get that to scale, as opposed to these other 18 hats you typically have to wear as a founder? And it actually takes kind of like a lot of the things that people don't enjoy about company building, and they just get to focus on the fun stuff, which is the product and the customer and building something that matters.
Yeah. You're doing all this in Miami.
Yeah.
Most people know others who have been yelling and screaming about Miami for good reason.
Yeah.
I live in Miami.
Yeah. Me too.
You are the, I think, patient zero.
Yes.
Is probably the best way to describe this, of the tech kind of boom, at least the recent one in Miami. Tell us a story as to what the hell were you doing in Miami last year? Why did you stay? And then how did you convince some of the early folks to go ahead and come check it out and end up moving here?
Yeah. So, I had a bunch of friends that were trying to convince me for a while to come to Miami, and hey, let's spend a week together, 7 friends, primarily from New York. Why don't you come join us? And finally I gave in. I was like, okay, well, we'll do the Miami trip. So we did the Miami trip. We were supposed to stay for 7 days. And 4 days into the trip, I actually got COVID.
Oh, okay.
Which was unfortunate. I kept testing positive for about a month and a half on the PCR test. So I was basically, it wasn't like terrible for me or anything like that, but I didn't feel comfortable flying back to California. I didn't want to spread it on a plane or anything.
And this is like
that.
March or April of last year?
This was June of last year.
Okay.
So my friends and I, we kept renting like other houses in different areas. Our Airbnbs kept expiring. So we're kind of like these nomads moving around the city. And as a result, I got to see all the communities here and all the amazing places to live and who's here. And I just fell in love with the city. I just said, man, this place is absolutely incredible. And in July, I found a house I liked, put in an offer, was in contract, bought a place in August. And from that point forward, I just regularly catch up with people on Zooms, a lot of people who run, big firms, big venture capital firms, a lot of founders, things like that. And the perennial question you always got during COVID was, where are you? So people would say, where are you? And I'd say, Miami. And they'd say, Miami? Why are you in Miami? This was before Miami was hot, right? So I felt the need to explain myself a little bit.
Defend
myself. Yeah. So I just told them honestly, like, why I thought Miami was such an amazing place. And almost all of them moved here afterward.
Really?
Which was pretty incredible. And since then, they've brought tons of people. So I probably directly recruited, 2 or 3 dozen people, not on purpose, by the way, just telling them, here's why I did it. Here's why I think it's great and why I think it's interesting.
Was it because they were looking for somewhere to go? Or was it like they were almost like running from something or running to something? Or maybe it's a mix?
It probably was a little bit of a mix. I think one of the most important things, like historically, as we look at this period of COVID that it did for the United States, is it decoupled location and opportunity. It used to be you had to live in a specific area to participate in opportunity in the economy. And that led to all sorts of problems, like housing prices being crazy. A lot of people can't get access to that because they're priced out. And now I think distributed works, remote works, and people started realizing, wow, I'm actually really effective over Zoom. Maybe I'm more effective over Zoom. I mentioned to you last year, we started about a company a month. That's more than any point in our history. So I realized, wow, I can be more productive, and Miami is absolutely incredible. And it seems like everyone wants to move here. Let's skate to where the puck's going and, not just stay behind. And I think a lot of people had the same thought. They gave it a try and they said, wow, this is incredible. And there are massive advantages to being here. I mean, we're more productive than we've ever been. We're building more faster than we ever have. And I'm a big believer in the ecosystem and how it can be a big part of the future of technology.
Yeah. I always tell people I'm happier here.
Yeah.
And it's a weird thing to say. It feels kind of woo-woo, like, what does that mean?
Totally.
But there's this balance. I think that in New York and San Francisco, I think a lot of people do the same thing where you would go to work, You would be there all day. You would literally leave and you would go home, and then you were too exhausted to go do anything or whatever. And then you would like live for the weekend, right?
Yeah.
Then you would like go out on the weekend, get drunk, lose half of the next day because you're hungover and groggy or whatever.
Right.
And then you like do that again. And the next thing you know, like 3 years went by.
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, oh my God, like what have I been doing with my life?
Totally.
Here, I think there's almost like a more efficiency, like a higher efficiency. So you get more done, but it's actually in somewhat of a shorter time period. And then it almost feels like you like go on vacation when you leave the office. And then you come back and do it again.
It's incredible. It's like the quality of life here is so high relative to any other place I've at least been exposed to in the United States. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, my girlfriend and I joke, like, if we want to go on vacation, we can drive 10 minutes to the beach, and literally like the way Miami works is you can get the beach chairs and everything, like even if you're not staying at the hotel. So you can go and drive for 10 minutes and have that kind of an experience whenever you want. And when you're working really hard, you do need a little bit of an ability to unplug. And the magic, I think, is work hard, play hard a little bit in our model, and being able to unplug. And I think that works really well in Miami. But I completely agree. Like, I was just so struck by how happy people are here. Yeah. And it's not just certain people. It's like everyone is happy here.
I do think the sun has a huge play into it.
I
like,
think so.
Which sounds stupid and everyone laughs, whatever. But I try every day to go for a walk outside.
Yeah.
And I did this during COVID in New York. And you go outside, you feel good, whatever. For whatever reason, walking and the sun shining and all this stuff, you just feel different. And I think that that's why when people come visit, they stay. Yeah. Or they're like, oh, I got to do this, right? Is you can talk about it all you want, and then somebody comes and actually experiences it. And some of it's the energy, some of it's, oh, there's real people here, whatever.
Totally, yeah.
But I think it almost just like, oh, the sun like hit my face, and like, damn, I want to do this every day.
I mean, sunlight's magical. Like, we're human beings. We're actually like meant to be in the sun. There's all these chemical things that happen with the sun. The sun hits your eyes, and like it actually produces chemicals that make you happy. If you live in a place that doesn't have a lot of sunshine, there's something called seasonal like depressive disorders, SAD, something like that. And here you get the sun, you can be outside. And I think another thing that I've really enjoyed is I work all day, so I'm inside. And then at night you can go outside, and it's actually nice outside at night, and you can enjoy the outdoors, and you can be outside as well, which I think is really compelling. Yeah.
Crypto. I know that you've got some unique thoughts there. Have you guys done anything? How do you think about that industry specifically? Is it a different skill set than what you have? Do you guys see opportunity there?
Yeah, crypto is absolutely massive, obviously. I mean, it's changing the world in so many different ways. I think that, one macro question with crypto, like if we fast forward 10 years from now and we look at crypto does take capital and resources out of our financial system. So, normally like you go and you put money in the bank goes and lets people buy homes or start companies and lends the money out and kind of makes it really productive. And I think, in crypto, it's kind of like buying gold. So you buy gold, but that money isn't in the economy anymore in an interesting way. So I'm really excited about some of the DeFi stuff that's happening. Personally, I'm a huge fan of projects like Luna and Terra that, for example, take crypto assets and then actually make them investable or let people lend them out, or you can invest in stocks and you can put it back into the economy. I think that that's kind of a really interesting bridge that crypto is going through right now that's happening. And I think over the next 5-10 years, it's going to be really, really important that continues to happen and accelerates.
Yeah. Is there things that you think you guys are uniquely positioned to do there? Or is it something where when you start getting into protocols and decentralization and some of the things that make kind of Bitcoin and crypto unique, that's outside of kind of the focus that you guys have in terms of company building, right? Or could one day Atomic build a protocol and, kind of go that direction?
We could absolutely build a protocol. I have so many ideas in crypto. I think it's a really interesting area. We are terrified to touch it.
Why?
I don't want to break the law. I don't want to go to jail.
Got it. Like, from a regulatory standpoint, you're scared. Or nervous, maybe is the better way to put it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, is it worth? We have so much good stuff going on. Is it worth risking that? We would like to do it. Maybe it's a matter of we need to get smarter about kind of how to go about doing that. We always kind of want to do things by the book as much as we possibly can. So it's just we've been a little nervous, and there's so much opportunity in company building that it's hard to get away from that. But who knows? Maybe there will be opportunities to partner on things in cool ways or do interesting things. I mean, there's tremendous opportunity. It's still in its infancy. There's so many places it's going to go from here, and it's really important. I actually think it's a little unfortunate that the US has taken such a hard stance on it, because a lot of innovation is happening in other parts of the globe as a result of that. But that's a key consideration that we're thinking about.
Got it. Before we get into the rapid fire to finish up, I want to talk about like your motivation. Right?
Yeah.
So if you look at kind of your career, you started at a very young age.
Yeah.
You've had a lot of success building companies.
Yeah.
Now creating these businesses. By every stretch of the imagination, you've accomplished more than most people would want to accomplish in a career. You've been very, very successful. Why are you still doing this? Right? like when you wake up every day, right? There's a lot of people who would just be like, I'm good.
Yeah.
Why are you still doing it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it is a question I get increasingly.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, which is interesting. The reality is, like, I sold my first company at 24. I could have, invested and stayed on a beach the rest of my life and like lived some happy life or something like that. To me, impact is really, really motivating. And the best litmus test I've figured out for determining impact is answering the question of what would not have happened had I not been born. And it actually makes me really happy to know that there are a lot of major, major things that have happened because I exist. And I want to be able to continue that. And Atomic is a platform that we've launched dozens of companies so far. Over time, maybe we could launch hundreds. It's possible it could spawn thousands of companies. We invented the studio model in the tech industry very early on. A lot of people have replicated that. If I didn't invent that, it might not have happened. Those have created thousands of companies. We've helped innovate and create new industries and all sorts of interesting things. So impact is really interesting. And I am actually interesting in that I'm happiest when I'm working on new ideas with really good people. I love imagining a better future and like trying to invent things and trying to work on things and whiteboarding. And, that's just the way my mind works. I just need to be very, very busy for like me to be happy, which I kind of get from my dad, who's also done very well, who despite not having to do anything after, he took a huge company public and he's done a lot of amazing things. He decided to pick up an organic chemistry textbook. When people are in college, if they have to take organic chemistry,
they hate it.
It's like the worst class they could ever take. He picked up textbooks with text this big, and he would just go and read through them. And now he's designing new drugs. He's just like making new drugs from scratch. He has no background in it. Some of them are in clinical trials. They are drugs that can change the world, like meaningfully improve people's lives. And he does it because it makes him happy. And like, I don't know, you just have, to me, purpose is really important. Impact is really important. I want to maximize that as much as possible over the course of my life. And the other cool thing about taking that path, if you choose to take that path, which is really hard and takes a lot of work, is you get to work with awesome people. And working with awesome people is probably the most important thing you can do, I think, after you get out of college. The 5 people you surround yourself with, that's your continuing education. That's like how you grow. That's how you interact. And Atomic is kind of the best thing that I can think of how to get really, really, really amazing people together in a room working on awesome things. And I just get a lot of energy from working with awesome people. So I really enjoy it.
Is there a way that you measure it, like quantitatively, in terms of impact? Like you said, like what doesn't exist in the world if I hadn't been born? But is there maybe like a goal, right? Like, hey, we want to do 100 companies, or we want to create a certain amount of market cap, or some other quantitative metric that isn't just that didn't exist unless we built it, right? Like, which by itself is super self-satisfying and probably makes you very happy. But are there other ways that you think about like kind of quantifying it?
Yeah, definitely. I think about it in terms of like improving people's lives and like how did things get better and how did things change? It depends on the company in terms of how that manifests itself. Sometimes it's in job creation directly and indirectly. Some of the innovations I've done have led to millions of jobs, actually, which is crazy. Like, think about that. It's like stadiums full of people that like have jobs because I had this idea and, you know, I've helped bring it into the world. And that's pretty special. That's pretty amazing. The macro thought is like, it'd be awesome to try to be like one of the most impactful people ever. And I actually think it's possible. I'm 35 now. I still have a lot of energy. I'm pretty sure if I stopped doing this, I would just like wouldn't be happy. So I'm on some kind of treadmill.
Fall over dead at 36.
Yeah. Kind of continuing to work on this stuff, and it makes me happy. And that would be really awesome to have that kind of impact.
Awesome. 3 questions, and then you get to ask me one to finish. Most important book you've ever read?
That's an interesting question. I really loved 0 to 1 that Peter Thiel wrote. I think it's a really interesting framework on how to think about opportunities and how the world's changing. And there are a lot of lessons and principles in there that some of which are immutable, that if you understand them, they can kind of change your perspective on how everything operates and why the world changes the way that it does and what's happening in the world. And I'm very interested in that. So I enjoyed that book a lot.
Yeah. That's a classic for a reason,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, totally.
Sleep schedule. So I sleep 5 or 6 hours. Mateo and Alex over at 8 Sleep got me now. I'm a sleep convert.
Yeah.
8-9 hours. Yeah. Can't sleep without it.
Yeah.
If I can't get it turned on or something because of user error, I'm like pissed at myself. What's your sleep schedule, you know, and how's that changed over time?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm like always changing myself. So I went through this phase when I was here in Miami at first, where I would stay up until like 2 or 3 a.m. like every single night. And a lot of my most productive hours are like between midnight and 3 a.m. And that always has been the case. Like no one's bothering me, no one's texting me, no one's emailing me. So I actually really enjoyed that. But I've realized I really need my sleep. And, you know, getting 8 or 9 hours is really, really, really important. And to some extent, like the most important things are actually just making very good decisions and coming up with really good ideas. And, you know, the more sleep that you have, the more likely you are to do that. And, you know, the happier that you'll be. So recently I've been converting. We're starting to go to bed earlier. Bedtime's moved up. It's been a massive help. And actually the benefit of that being in Miami relative to the West Coast is I wake up like 3 hours before the West Coast and I get to clear my plate in the beginning of the day. And I enter the day playing offense. Here's what, you know, okay, I cleared my plate. What do I want to get done today? What's important? Let's edit the schedule and like, let's go and do it. And that feeling of being able to wake up and play offense every day is just like a much better feeling and way to live.
I like your approach because it's a very relentless approach. It's just, let's go every single day, right?
Yeah.
Last question is aliens. Are you a believer or non-believer?
Oh, this is an interesting question. Well, you know, given that the Pentagon released basically that aliens exist, that interestingly nobody talked about when it came out. They released all the footage. There are people like on aircraft carriers that say that off of the east coast, some kind of craft, whether it's aliens or whatever, UFOs, it could be spy things, I don't know, but they appeared every single day. They saw them every day. These are not people that are going to lie. They have no incentive to lie. They work in the Navy. So I don't know. I think we live in a really interesting time. Yeah.
Like it's the bombshell. Oh, they just, you know, slowly getting the public to be like, yeah. And then just bam, here you go.
And nobody cares and nobody talks about it. And, you know, it is what it is, I suppose.
Edward Snowden said, though, when he got inside the system, that's one of the things he searched for and he didn't find anything, which always is fascinating to me of like, you know, is it more complex than we make it? Well, I don't know.
It could be more complex. It could be some kind of strange aerial phenomenon. It could be some other thing about physics that we don't understand. It's possible. We just don't know. But the government has told us now at this point, and they're going to release a lot of information, I guess, apparently at the end of this month.
Yeah.
That might shock the world even more than it did before around this.
My conclusion on, let's say, like the UFO footage is if it's aliens, and I put the air quotes, whatever that means, shocking.
Yeah.
If it's something with physics that we don't understand and then we learn it, shocking.
Yeah.
Right? Like
amazing.
Whenever you have something that we don't understand and then we learn about it, like there's going to be inflection point in our knowledge, in our, understanding of galaxy or whatever, but it's just like, it's big.
Yeah.
And let's see what happens. Right.
Yeah.
You could ask me one question to finish up. What do you got for me?
Yeah, we're like, let's fast forward like 5 or 10 years. Where are we at with crypto? Obviously, you know so much about it. How has it changed? How has it evolved? Where are we? Has it taken over the world? Has it supplanted?
I think everyone thinks about it in terms of like the technology.
Yeah.
To me, it's just automation. That's all we're talking about is automation. And so it's an automated central bank.
Yeah.
It's independent. It's dependable. It's predictable.
Yep.
It's all stuff. It's automation.
Yeah.
All these decentralized open protocols empower automation. Every asset that we used to have was physical in nature, physical stock certificate, physical bonds, physical currency. Then they've moved to this like electronic CUSIP version. Now when you buy the stock, you're buying an electronic CUSIP. Currency, electronic CUSIP.
Yeah.
Well, it's just going to become digital. And then once you have digital assets, I always joke that like right now, if you want to have an automated system and any financial assets involved, it's like trying to take a cassette tape and put it in a CD-ROM player. Like they're incompatible technology.
That's true.
Well, if everything's digital and now it's all compatible, like who knows what people are going to create?
Who knows? Who knows?
But just things change fast.
Yeah.
And so to me, like that's more of what it is. And so it's less about like, is it a thing? Is it not? It's just like, I think we all generally agree like an automated world is where we're going.
Yeah.
This will be a more efficient, a faster, more valuable world.
Yeah.
And so like this is a piece of that evolution.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it through that lens, like this actually isn't that revolutionary, right? It's more kind of an evolutionary type thing. But then when you like start getting in the details, you're like, oh, wait a minute. Like if you take down central banks or strip them of their power, like there are many non-technological ramifications of that. That start to change the world, right?
Totally,
and so I think that like that's kind of the lens. It's more of like an automation, and then where I think a lot of the kind of Bitcoin and crypto people get excited, myself included, is like, okay, what are the ramifications as this becomes prevalent? And short answer, we don't know yet.
Yeah, we don't know. It'll be interesting.
We'll see, right?
It's changing the world. It's changing the world, that's for sure. It's gonna
All
be
right,
really
where can we send people to find you on Twitter or find out more about Atomic?
I'm just at Jack Abraham. Atomic, our website is atomic.vc. We actually launched a program recently where people can apply to start companies with us. We would love, people to increase access to us. If they want to start a company, come find us. Like we want to start companies.
How do they apply for that?
The website is atomic.vc/future founders, I believe, or you can Google Future Founders Atomic. It'll come up. And yeah, we'd strongly encourage people to do that. It's a fun place. We're having a great time, but we're building things that are really meaningful too. That, the intersection of like purpose and fun is pretty interesting. So if anyone's interested in that, they can do it. And we're going to build a lot of companies here in Miami. So if anyone wants to build a company in Miami, you can have your cake and eat it too. This is a great place. And, there's some epic things to build.
You're never going to stop explaining Miami, and I love it. Everyone should come.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Listen, thank you so much for doing this.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. Great to see you.